Unfortunately, I have to begin my presentation with an apology, and I know it's going to be a huge disappointment to many of you, but unfortunately, I have absolutely no PowerPoint slides to share with you today. So I understand the disappointment. If you want to go outside, check email, do something productive, I completely understand. So my topic today is the future of work, and it's certainly a topic that's getting an increasing amount of attention in the news media, in conversations, and I have to say, at least from my experience, the topic is dominated by fear and anxiety. I think there's increasing fear that all this exponential technology that we've been talking about is going to take away all our jobs, and that increasingly, we are in the bullseye of all this technology, that no matter what our credentials, no matter what our experience, machines are eventually going to take all our work. So I'm here to say, actually, I believe that fear is fully justified. And I will talk about that. But I'm also here to say that that fear tends to overwhelm another discussion and another element of this dimension of the future of work that is not getting attention, which I believe needs to, which is that actually, ultimately, this technology, these machines can become catalysts to help us restore our humanity. And that's an incredible opportunity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both, the fear and the opportunity. On the fear side, I would say that to understand the potential risk and challenge here, we need to understand the institutional context that we operate in. Around the world, we have developed institutions, and when I talk about institutions, I'm not just talking about companies. I'm talking about governments, I'm talking about schools, NGOs. All our institutions have been built globally around a model of scalable efficiency. That model indicates that the reason we have institutions to begin with is because it is easier and lower cost to coordinate activities across a large number of individuals if they're all within one institution rather than scattered across many institutions. And that model has actually driven global institutions for decades, if not centuries. But it's interesting to see how in that model of scalable efficiency, work has come to be defined. In the model of scalable efficiency, the way we achieve efficiency is to define work, first of all, as tightly defined tasks. The tasks get minutely defined in advance. They become highly standardized. They need to be done exactly the same efficient way wherever they're done within the institution. And then again, in the name of scalable efficiency, we've tightly integrated all those tasks. We've eliminated all those inefficient buffers that separate the tasks. That's been the model of scalable efficiency. Tightly specified, highly standardized, tightly integrated tasks. Well, guess what? If that's what work is, machines can do that so much more efficiently than we human beings can. They don't get distracted, they don't get sick, they do it efficiently and predictably. And if that's what work is, it is only a matter of time before it's all taken from us. And I know there are all kinds of studies done that show that, 47% of work or 28% of work is vulnerable to automation. I'm here to tell you, if that's what work is, 100% of that work will be automated. So, and just to add to some of the bad news there's a lot of talk in the future of work about the gig economy, this notion of independent contractors doing short-term work as gigs for others. In the US, in the period from 2005 to 2015, 94% of net job creation was in the gig economy. Significant portion of work and an increasing portion of work being done by the gig economy. But again, it's interesting to note that most of the gig work, at least to date, has been relatively routine tasks. The classic model is the Uber driver, the mobile fleet operator, driver, translation services, bookkeeping services, all of these things done as a gig work. Well, again, if that's what the gig economy is, those routine tasks, they're all going to be taken too. We've talked earlier about autonomous vehicles. What happens to that driver in the autonomous vehicle? All of that work will be taken. So, what's the answer? I mean, it may be meaningful that this talk is given in the week of May 1st. We could all head to the barricades, fight the machine, resist the machine. I'd like to say that actually we ought to resist that temptation. That in fact, we ought to think about how we can use this technology as a catalyst to help us redefine work in ways that actually restore our humanity. And ask the fundamental question, which is, what is work that we humans are uniquely positioned and qualified to perform? What could that work be, and how could we develop that over time? And what I mean by that is work that requires curiosity, creativity, imagination, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, work that we human beings are really qualified to perform, but which actually is highly discouraged in the environment of scalable efficiency. Creativity, imagination, your tasks have been predefined. Perform them as defined. Do not deviate. Be predictable. So I think the opportunity is to rethink work at a fundamental level and to really nurture and expand that kind of work so that more and more of us can be focused on that as a way to earn a living. Now, I will say that when I articulate this position, I encounter two fundamental objections, very strongly held objections by the people who have them. The first is, well, wait a minute, come on, John, be realistic. Not all of us are capable of being creative and imaginative. Most of us just want to be told what to do and to have the security and reliability of a paycheck if we do what's expected of us. I would push back on that objection and take anyone who has that objection to a playground. And let's go watch 6- and 7-year-old children playing. Show me one of them that doesn't have curiosity, creativity, imagination. Show me one. We all had that at one point in our lives. Something's happened to most of us as we went through life. And I would argue that what happened to us was we got introduced to institutions, starting with schools, where the instruction was very clear. Listen to the teacher, take good notes, and play it back when asked, predictably and reliably. And if you want imagination or creativity, there's a playground outside. When you're out there, you can do what you want. But when you're in here, you do what you're told. And I will tell you, at least from my study in the US, of the US public school system, that institutional framework is not accidental. it was deliberately designed to take children from rural areas, farms, and train them how to be factory workers, to follow instructions predictably and reliably in a world of scalable efficiency. So we have lost that. But I believe we all have not only the ability, but the desire to recapture that, as suppressed as it might be by us and by our institutions. We all have that capability. And by the way, when I talk about creative and imaginative work, often people think about, well, you're talking about becoming a research scientist. No, I'm not. Actually, most of the work that I see emerging in this world that's evolving around us, this exponential world, has to do with things like becoming craftspeople. You've heard a lot of talk about some of the exponential technologies that I believe are going to lead to the end of the mass market production systems we have around the world. And where increasingly the demand is going to be for unique crafts that are highly creative and artistic, woodwork, pottery, you name it, but something that is highly creative and unique. There's going to be a tremendous opportunity for work in that space. Coaches. There's a whole category of work that I describe as coaches. We all are going to want to achieve more of our potential. Wellness coaches. Coaches in terms of talent development, achieving more, building more of our talents and having more impact. Coaching. And then a third category of work that I call composers. And by this I don't mean music composers, although that could be part of it. But it's composing experiences that will give others a richer and fuller and more enjoyable life. I'm struck, for example, by the evolution in Airbnb. One of the things that Airbnb is focused on is in helping their hosts, not just to provide an accommodation that is reliable, but to create an experience for the guests that is unique and really enjoyable for that guest. So composers of experiences. And again, I believe we all have the potential to occupy one of those opportunity areas. So I'm excited about that opportunity. The other objection that I get is not just that people aren't capable of doing that kind of work, but on the other side, I get the objection, well, there's very limited demand for that kind of work. There may be a few people who want these kinds of coaches and composers and craftspeople, but it's very limited work opportunity. There's going to be very limited demand. I would actually counter that and argue that, in fact, we as human beings have an insatiable demand, all of us, to achieve far more of our potential and have far more impact in the world around us. And that especially as the products, the basics of life, become more affordable as a result of a lot of this technology, exponential technology and automation, as these things, as we focus more on access versus ownership of a lot of the property that we need in our lives, we're going to have more disposable income to spend on things that actually can help us achieve more of our potential and have more impact in our lives. And I believe, again, that demand is insatiable. So I see expanding opportunity in terms of that kind of work. So I believe we're all capable of that kind of work, and I believe there's going to be a growing and insatiable demand for that kind of work. So I see that as the opportunity ahead, to use this technology as a catalyst to make that transition. Now, I don't want to argue that this is going to be a simple transition. I actually believe at best it's going to be very challenging, and at worst it can be a very painful transition. And I think it's challenging in part because of the institutions we have today. If we're going to make this transition, we need to reframe at a fundamental level innovation. Innovation is talked about everywhere, present company excluded. But innovation, when we talk about it, tends to get reduced very quickly to product innovation or technology innovation. Sometimes we'll talk about service innovation, process innovation, sometimes even business model innovation. I want to suggest there's a much more fundamental level of innovation, which is not yet on our agenda but needs to be. And it's what I call institutional innovation. It's going back to the most fundamental question of all, which is, why do we have institutions? And I mentioned earlier, the institutions we have today are all driven by that model of scalable efficiency, that rationale of scalable efficiency. I would make the case that if we really understand the impact of all this exponential technology, that rationale is becoming less and less compelling. It is far easier to connect with and coordinate activity across a large number of people wherever they are. But my belief is, in an exponentially changing world, there's a new rationale for institutions that will be very compelling in the future and drive impact for all institutions. And it has to do with what I describe as scalable learning, not scalable efficiency. The reason we will come together in large institutions in the future is because we'll learn faster as part of those institutions than we ever could on our own or as part of a smaller organization or institution. That is a fundamentally different rationale. And I can't tell you the number of executives I run into when I talk about scalable efficiency and scalable learning. They say to me, wow, that's really interesting. We'll do both, scalable efficiency and scalable learning. In the spirit of provocation, I want to make the case that actually these two are fundamentally in opposition with each other. You can't have both. You have to choose. Which is it going to be? Think about the scalable efficiency world. What's the key message in a scalable efficiency world? Failure is not an option. We need predictability and reliability. You deliver as predicted, as expected. Do not fail. Guess what? Learning demands failure, but it's not an option. So tell me again how we're going to do scalable learning in this kind of environment. And then think again about the environment we've created. Tightly specified activities, highly standardized activities, tightly integrated activities. Where's the room to experiment, to improvise, to innovate, to learn? There is no room. Everything has been tightly defined. It's the reason why when I talk to executives about learning, the answer is, sure, we have learning. We have a training room over there. We'll take you out of your work environment. We'll send you over there. You can learn all you want and come back and do your job as expected. Guess what? My belief, based on the research we've done, is the most powerful and effective learning occurs day to day on the job in the work environment, not in a training room. And actually, I would make the case that training programs are going to become more and more irrelevant in an exponential world. Because the kind of learning that's going to be most valuable and necessary to create value in an exponential world is learning that involves creating new knowledge, not sitting listening to some instructor give us knowledge that already is available. It's creating new knowledge through action in the workplace, dealing with unexpected situations. That's a very different form of learning, and our institutions are totally unequipped today to support that kind of learning. And yet, if we're going to make this transition, we need to reinvent our institutions, innovate at the institutional level to drive that kind of scalable learning opportunity. And I'll just say, as another note, in terms of the challenge of the transition, if you take what I've just said seriously, it involves fundamental transformation of organizations. This isn't just some kind of incremental change on the margin. This is fundamental. Everything changes in terms of how we operate, how we organize, how we reward, motivate people. Everything changes. Large-scale organizational transformation is hugely challenging. I've been involved in large-scale transformation efforts for over 30 years. And the one thing that I have developed as a result of all that experience is an extraordinary respect for the immune system and the antibodies that exist in every large existing institution. Do not underestimate that immune system. And it's one of the reasons why I've become hugely skeptical of the classic approach to transformation, which is somebody comes to a gathering like this, gets conviction, we need to transform. They go in front of their leadership team, they announce we're going to transform, we're going to change everything. And because we're a large organization, this is going to take a long time. Can't turn around a battleship overnight. And because this is a large organization, it's going to take a lot of money. You can't do this on a shoestring. But trust me, at the end of all that, wonderful things will happen. In my experience, what that individual has just done is put a bullseye on their back and invited the immune system to come out and attack. A lot of money? Where's that money coming from? A long time? We have quarterly performance pressure today. Can't afford to think about the long term. And they mobilize to crush. And I will say certainly the academic studies that have been done around large-scale transformation efforts suggest there is an extraordinarily high failure rate in those efforts. It's why over time I've come to believe that there's a different approach to transformation that has much more potential and that honors that immune system. It's something that we call scaling edges. And it says rather than coming in top down and trying to transform the existing core of the business, of the institution, instead find an edge that today is a relatively modest part of the organization or institution. But if you understand the exponential forces that are playing out in your relevant markets or environments, that edge has the potential to scale to the point where it could become the new core of your institution. Not just a diversification and a side thing, but actually could become the new core of the institution. And focus the transformation through scaling that edge. And over time, rather than trying to take that edge and push it back into the core to become a catalyst for change, no. Keep scaling the edge, and over time, pull more and more of the people and resources from the core out into that edge to the point where it becomes the new core of the institution. In my experience, that actually significantly reduces the potential of the immune system to come after the effort. And because of the exponential technologies and changes that we've been talking about, there is an opportunity to scale those edges at a far more rapid pace today than was ever feasible 20, 30 years ago. And to actually do it with far less resource by leveraging the scaling edge initiatives, by mobilizing third parties to support the scaling of your edge. Very different approach to organizational transformation. So, I guess in a very brief period of time, I've been talking about the notion of the future of work. On the one hand, the view that the technology that we're developing not only has the potential, but will take the work that we have today and make it done by machines, but that ultimately this can become a catalyst to help us reimagine what work could be and restore our humanity, to find work that actually is work that we should be doing, rather than defining work in ways that try to make us into machines. No, find work that can help us achieve more of our potential, express more of our individuality, and achieve far more impact. And by the way, one of the key phrases today is this notion of using technology to augment humans, I want to suggest, yes, there's a significant opportunity there, but a key element in this new model of work that I'm talking about is humans augmenting other humans, finding ways for us to work together in ways that will help us to learn faster together and achieve far more of our potential. That, to me, is the opportunity. And I'll just say in finishing that I started my career many, many years ago with a firm called Boston Consulting Group, BCG. And at BCG, many, many years ago, oversimplification, they made their reputation on one chart. It was called the experience curve. And it was a way to describe how performance improves over time in a market or industry. And they started by looking at the semiconductor industry, at not the performance of the chip, but the operating performance of the business, semiconductor business. Over time, it followed a very predictable path, consistent and predictable path. And over time, they applied that analysis to a whole range of other markets and industries, everything from Japanese beer to toilet paper, and this experience curve played out in all those markets and industries. Very accurate and perceptive description of how performance improves. The issue with it is a diminishing returns curve. The more experience you get in a market or industry, the longer and harder you have to work to get that next increment of performance. That's the scalable efficiency model at work. My belief is if we take this technology seriously and use it as a catalyst to redefine work, for the first time, we can create a business environment where there's an increasing returns curve, where the more of us who join together, the more and more value we can create together. Thank you very much.
I think we have a couple of minutes, and then after this you would be
I'll be here at lunch,
here as well.
happy
Let's take some questions. Where's the microphone? Questions. One at the back, over there.
Hello, thank you very much for this very inspiring talk. I wonder, you were talking about the respect you've developed for this immune system. I'm happy it's not frustration you've developed throughout the years, because working in a similar field, not having your amount of years, I feel very much frustrated in trying to infuse the transformation you are talking about. So I wonder, how do you see this trend of having all those innovation labs and digital labs that are probably these edges outside of organizations that are trying to be scaled up, but many times throughout our research interviews that we've been conducting at the Bauhaus universities, the people are really frustrated by the absorptive capacity that is expected to exist back into the organization, right? So how do you scale those labs and innovation places outside the organization in a way that they can actually function and grow and not needing the mothership, right? With all the problems that come with it.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Thank you.
Oh, great question. I will say I'm in Silicon Valley. I've been in Silicon Valley for over 35 years, and if you go up and down the streets of Silicon Valley, I can guarantee that virtually every large company around the world has an innovation lab in Silicon Valley. Almost guaranteed. And I know many of the people in those innovation labs. In fact, the co-chairman of the center, the research center that I run, a man by the name of John Seeley Brown, for several decades was the leader of Xerox's Palo Alto Research Center, one of the classic innovation lab institutions. I will say, again, broad generalization, that from the innovation lab leaders that I know, there is an unstated understanding between the heads of the innovation labs and the core of the business, which is, we're going to give you some money and some people to play with. Just remember one thing: don't ever come back. because if you do, we're going to kill you. And these are completely rational people. They understand. They do what they want off on this side, and they don't come back. And that leads to the challenge. And I would say that from my viewpoint, the key to getting impact from those efforts, first of all, is to focus them on one thing. I think one of the issues with innovation labs is you get all kinds of little experiments. Focus on one edge that has the potential to scale, and find somebody at the senior leadership of the core, one person, it doesn't have to be the whole leadership team, but one person who is willing to fly air cover and protect that edge and find a way for it to scale without coming back into the core. Because if it comes back into the core, it will be killed. So, thank you.
Thank you. Second question over there. Andy.
Hi, John. Good to see you.
Hey,
Andy.
good to see you.
So, what do you think is the role of the leader in this whole thing? And we have a lot of leaders here today, and especially, there's a lot of talk about what's the role of the C-level. What's the C-level? What's the board supposed to do about this?
Oh, man.
Not easy.
Not easy, right? That's a whole other presentation. In short form, I would say from my experience, the role of the board and the leaders, first of all, is to find ways to pull out of the short term. I think we've become strong advocates of an approach that we call zoom out, zoom in approach to strategy, which is focus on a 10 to 20 year horizon and get alignment around a shared view of what is the future of our business going to look like 10 to 20 years from now. And then zoom in and ask the question in the next 6 to 12 months, what are the 2 or 3 business initiatives that we could pursue that could accelerate our movement towards that longer term destination? In our experience, that's a very powerful vehicle for getting alignment around a long-term destination and very pragmatic, short-term, impact-driven actions that will drive growth and impact in the core business. And one of the elements of that zoom out, zoom in, if it's done right, is it is very helpful in that zoom out piece in identifying an edge that today is relatively modest and minor. But if you understand the long-term forces and the destination you're shooting for, actually has the potential to become the new core, and that can become one of those short-term initiatives, is start that edge initiative. So I think that's the key issue, I think, for leaders. And I will say that from my experience, one of the ways I characterize the move from scalable efficiency to scalable learning is in scalable efficiency world, the mark of a strong leader is somebody who has all the answers. No matter what the question, the leader has the answer. My belief in the world of scalable learning, the most powerful and effective leaders are going to be the ones who have the best and most powerful questions, not the answers. And by the way, I can't resist a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Pablo Picasso, who once made the comment, he said, "Computers are useless. All they have are answers." I think what we need are the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. John Hagel.